Hey guys, I am back, and we are tackling the last part of Titus, Titus 3 1 through 15. I want to give you a couple things to think about as you're thinking through this week. The main idea that I'm really going to get across is just the overall idea of our foundation for good works and then the fruitfulness of good works. So, this passage really, it just kind of encapsulates everything that we've talked about. Um, my main thing that I'm pressing the students this week is I want you to be concerned about the gospel. So, one thing you need to know, like, and this is just kind of a nerdy thing that, Michael sometimes bring, there's a lot of times in these passages where it brings up a middle participle, like a present middle participle. And that middle is basically kind of saying, hey, that person is concerned for that action, but is also an agent. They are part of the action. And so, what I'm going to really press with students again and really press with you guys is the intentionality for students to devote themselves for good works and be concerned about doing good works. But it's all rooted from a foundation. And that's what you're going to see for this coming week is that, it's giving the commands of submission to rulers and authorities, to obey, to be ready for every good work. And that's brought up again in the text. And it's basically this whole concept of showing gentleness, but this is to all people. So not only is this something not just for the church, but it's also for the church and the world to see. We want to show good works from a foundation of being changed by the gospel so that it will change not just how we view the church and not how we interact with others in the church, but also that be a testimony to the world. And then it gives a reminder, Paul's given a reminder to Titus and to the people, for you too were once foolish, disobedient, deceived, and so on and so forth. But, and that's kind of the whole like transition in the text, it says, but when the kindness of our God and his love for mankind appeared. So that's the main part where it transitions. You want to know how you're showing loving kindness? Well, it's because a God of loving kindness has changed your heart. He saved us, and that's the main verb. It's the main action verb that God has done through us and through the people that he's talking to in the book of Titus. And it says again, one of the bedrock parts of our faith, it's not by works of righteousness. That's what it says in verse 5. And then what I'll do with the students is I'm going to talk about the order of salvation and hint at some of those things and talk about how that relates back to what we're learning in our Baptist faith and message. So talking about what does regeneration mean? It's brought up in the text that it's a new birth, it's a rebirth. What is justification? That we are declared righteous before God. It's just as if I have never sinned. We are declared righteous before God. We've been converted. There's a conversion from death to life, that I was walking in sin, but now I'm walking in a new way. And then how do I walk in that new way? Well, I'm changed to where all the Spirit's abundant work in me is now fleshed out in how I devote myself to good works. And I love verse 8 because it really encapsulates everything, that our pursuit is to glorification, which is the hope of eternal life. Why? Because we're heirs to the inheritance of eternal life. If you're an heir, you haven't received it yet until there's a death. Well, you have to die, and then you'll receive that inheritance in heaven if you trust in Jesus. And it says, so those who have believed, this is in verse 8, he wants you to insist on these things so that you will devote yourself to good works. And again, this is for perspective of everyone. So there's an exclusive aspect. You have to believe, but there's also inclusive in that these are good and profitable for everyone. So with that being said, all of this, and then it gets into the part of talking about church discipline and rejecting certain things. But then in verses 12 through 15 kind of just wraps up everything in a practical sense. You start seeing names like Zenas the lawyer, Apollos, and then Artemis, Tychicus. You see all these different names of people who needed the discipleship and needed to walk through the journey of developing good works. And so my final questions I'll give to the students really is, and I'll read these for you as I'm going through my notes right now, and I will get to it, is this part. It talks about, we must make every effort for good works. So I want it to become a habit of our student ministry, not just seasonal efforts. So how can discipleship be our habit? How can we be attentive and intentional to learning to devote ourselves to good works? It's got to come through practical needs. In that last part of that chapter talks about the pressing needs of the church community. And we must be ready and careful and learn to do good works. So how does that look like as a part of our dedication to a church community, which many of you have already heard that before, but is really just kind of tying the bow or loose ends on all of that as we go through the book of Titus. I hope this is helpful to you. I hope you are reminded of how fitting and healthy it is to not forget where we come from in our foundation so that it propels us to good works, which is the gospel. So that's where I'm going to land on our final video for Titus 3, 1 through 15.